Chapter 9. Rich Man, Poor Man. How did Nana get so rich? I asked Uncle Dionorine one evening. Speculation on this subject continued to fascinate me and many others, but I had never heard Dionorine discuss it. We were standing on the front veranda enjoying the view of the brightly lighted houses across the town. Each Hindu family seemed to compete with its neighbors to see who could display the most dayas during the annual Diwali festival. The pundits say it was the spirits that gave him the gold. Dionorine shrugged uneasily. There really isn't any logical explanation, he added thoughtfully. Of course, Nana worked hard. Although a high-caste kshatriya, he started out as a farm boy cutting paragrass for 10 cents a day. Somehow he bought a shack from a Chinese for $50 and began making jewelry there. One night it burned down mysteriously. And after that he was a millionaire, although few outside the family knew it. As dusk turned to dark, the sacred lights all around us seemed to grow brighter. What a beautiful sight. Diwali was one of my favorite national holidays. To me, it was inspiring to see every Hindu home glowing far more brightly than Christian homes at Christmas. And not with electric lights, but with lives' flames on the ghee-soaked wicks. Like bright candles, the dayas were flickering on windowsills, tables, porch railings, and on steps from top to bottom, each in honor of Lakshmi, goddess of wealth and prosperity. Uncle Dionorine waved a hand toward a particularly well-lighted house. Nana always did his own special puja to Lakshmi twice a day during Diwali, alone in front of his big iron safe. There were other mystical rites in that room too, but no one was ever allowed to observe them. What do you think? Was it Lakshmi that made him wealthy, or the spirits? I asked. Our family pundit period, Ikli went through each room of the house with a lighted daya, worshipping the house and the spirits in it, especially the spirit of Nana who had built it. He would solemnly wave the daya 3 times in a clockwise circle around Nana's large photograph in the living room. We revered the spirits as much as the gods, and sometimes there was almost a confusion of identity between them. Does it matter what you call it? Isn't there only one force in the universe? I nodded solemnly. There is only one reality, Brahman, LLC Solution, Maya. We watched the lights in silence. One could almost feel the presence of Lakshmi and sense that she was pleased. But there was another question I had to ask, and finally I broke the silence. Some say that the same spirits that guard his fortune killed Nana before he could spend it. I don't understand that. What do you think? Uncle Dionorine didn't answer for several minutes. I waited impatiently. When at last he spoke, there was an uneasy note in his voice. I don't know. Every time Diwali comes, I think of my father's wealth, mysteriously acquired and mysteriously hidden beyond reach of any of us, and of his untimely death. He coughed nervously and turned to go back into the house. I don't like to talk about such things, he added softly over his shoulder. I remained there alone for a long time, watching the spectacular sight, marveling at how many dayas there were, and pondering the mystery of the many gods and spirits and the one reality. The lights are burned to Lakshmi, and special pujas said to her. She is the goddess of wealth and prosperity. I was explaining the Diwali festival to a Muslim boy as we sat eating our lunch together. He seemed interested, but as usual, a small crowd of hecklers had gathered. If Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth and prosperity, how come most Hindus are so poor? Demanded a tall black boy. It's a waste of time worshipping her. You don't understand karma and reincarnation, I retorted sharply. A man can be poor in one life and wealthy in the next. How many reincarnations does it take? Look around. Most East Indians are cane cutters living in poor houses. My family isn't poor. He means Indians in general, insisted a slight English youth. Look at India. It's the most miserable country in the world. Who says so? My father. He lived there before I was born. There are more rats than people and such poverty and disease. Maybe when the British ruled it, but not since independence. A momentary murmur of approval swept the crowd pressing around us. Trinidad was struggling to get out from under British rule, and independence was a word that lit a fire in every patriot's heart. People are starving in India while the rats get fat and the sacred cows die of old age, declared another boy, jumping into the fray. That's what her gods and reincarnation have done for India. I'm an atheist. I wouldn't have such gods. That's not true. My mother lives there and she never writes about anything like that. I knew that my antagonists were right, but it would cost me too much to admit it. India's poverty was a subject my mother carefully avoided in her letters. She described the gardens, the brightly plumed birds and exotic animals, and the temples and festivals. She told all about her guru, but never the condition of the people. Certain books I had read, however, left no question in my mind that the land of my religion was exceedingly poor. How could this be the result of thousands of years of yoga? Improving karma and upward reincarnation toward oneness with Brahman? Why did the Indian movies I saw always avoid giving an honest picture of the country? And why did I persist in arguing with the boys at school on at least several points where it was so obvious that I was wrong? Was I afraid of the truth? I could never admit that. The implication involved too much. "What makes you think this world the onlyest one?" asked Gosin, when I delicately raised the question of why so many Hindus were poor and suffering. He kept the dayas burning to Lakshmi day and night in his mud, but during Diwali, though he had told me that his karma was to be poor. "The Vedas say it have many worlds. Maybe it have only poor Hindus in this one. When they get better karma, they go to a better world." "Yeah, but ain't they have rich Hindus here too, like Nana and the pundits?" Gosin nodded solemnly. "What I go say, Bai, maybe it ain't does work for everybody. But other worlds have only rich, maybe." "Yeah, man, but in the Gita Krishna say that when karma worked out on other world, you go come back here again? Some things not so easy to catch." Did Gosin's eyes betray a fleeting doubt? He recovered quickly. "For the yogi rich and poor all same. Yogi like your father ain't go come back to this world. Never. In the Upanishads it say that all ignorance go away if they meditate on Brahman. They find 0M. Only yogis get this enlightenment." In referring to the Vedanta, Gosin had expressed well my supreme goal. One of my most prized possessions was a book on yoga that my mother had sent me from India. It contained advanced techniques that I was able to use by building upon the foundation of what I had learned at the temple. Lord Krishna had taught Arjuna that there was nothing more important than the diligent practice of yoga. By this divine raft, one could pass over ignorance and the most heinous deeds to eternal bliss. Before the age of 10, in addition to my daily meditation, I practiced yoga, the positions, breathing exercises, and meditation on the veranda outside my room from midnight to 1:30 a.m., when everyone else was asleep. I did either Brumadhya Drishti or Madhyama Drishti. This concentration, combined with the breathing exercises, projected me into realms of consciousness totally unrelated to the world around me. Through yoga, I experienced increasingly the presence of spirit beings who were guiding me and giving me psychic powers. The gods were real. All the argument softy boys at school could not change that. Sometimes I would be too excited by these experiences to be able to sleep when finally I went to bed. If only I could get Dionarine and other Hindus to practice yoga and meditation. Then they would know the truth about their religion. I must not enter nirvana alone. A guru is a teacher who leads others to eternal bliss. Rabbi, Rabbi! I was alone in the prayer room sitting in front of the small figure of Lord Krishna, breathing deeply and rhythmically, trying to imitate Krishna's smile. Aunt Ravati and I had quarreled bitterly again that morning, and yet I couldn't even remember how it had started. I was hoping, through meditation, to restore the sense of inner peace that seemed so elusive lately. But Ma and I were home alone, and there was no one else to answer when she called. "What is it, Ma?" I yelled back. "Somebody calling downstairs. Go see who it be." The family had gone to the beach for the annual Kartik Nahan festival. Most Hindus in Trinidad were bathing in the rivers, bays, and beaches in hope of spiritual cleansing. There was no bigger, busier, or more profitable day for the pundits. They would be hurrying through one puja after another for the bathers, gathering in the fees and gifts, and enjoying the food that everyone would share with them. It was a great day for improving one's karma by feeding Brahmins. I had begun to doubt the benefit of such rituals. Nothing could change one's karma. Certainly bathing at Kartik Nahan didn't. After drying off, many of these Hindus would go right back to eating meat, and some would even beat or otherwise abuse their wives. Such festivals had their place, but as Krishna had said, to the yogi all else is meaningless. I had chosen a better way to spend my precious time. "All right, Ma," I called. Reluctantly and carefully I wrapped Lord Krishna in his sacred cloth and put him away. Walking out on the veranda, I could hear someone knocking near the front steps. Leaning over the railing, I saw an elderly Indian beggar peering up at me. "What you want?" I called down to him. "Roti, Baba, roti," he replied, stretching out his hand appealingly toward me. Was he honoring me, or using Baba as a poor Hindu's way of ingratiating himself with the rich? I pushed the question aside. Though one would almost never invite a beggar inside, this one looked so pitiful that I did so. "Come upstairs," I yelled, motioning with my hand. "I go see what I have." Begging was, after all, an honorable way of helping Hindus build up good karma. Shaking his head, he pointed to his bare feet. "Me not able for climb up quite there?" "All right then, come round to the other gate." I pointed it out as I turned to enter the house. He looked like a shamar, an untouchable with very dark skin, someone I shouldn't allow to come near me. It would be defiling to a Brahmin. But as I watched him move painfully along, leaning heavily on his walking stick, lurching and stumbling, I felt a growing compassion for the old beggar. He was a human being too. I felt good just admitting it. Hurrying down the back stairs, I unlocked the gate. Greeting him with a warm smile, I led him slowly to the open patio under the kitchen at the back of the house. "Come sit here," I said, motioning to a chair beside a table. He stared back at me coldly through large, round, unblinking eyes. With a gasp and a thud, he dropped onto the chair. He ignored the water I gave him for washing his hands, apparently not interested in that. "I'm going to take out some food for you," I said pleasantly. Exploring the kitchen, I found some leftovers from breakfast. The thin, pancake-like roti and some cooked spinach mixed with hot spices called bhaji. Placing the food before him, I sat down to observe him with great interest. He was one of those traveling holy men, fairly common in our part of the island, who had renounced all possessions. Most had little to renounce. His long gray hair was uncombed and matted with dirt, and his beard had the remains of a variety of recently begged meals stuck among the unkempt hairs. The dhoti he wore, which apparently had once been white, was now gray and moldy, with numerous splotches of curry and sauces down the front. I had to shove my chair farther away. The odor he gave off was unbearable. Yet I felt a growing compassion for this repulsive fellow, and that gave me a sense of virtue. This would help my karma. "You come from far today?" I asked, hoping to start him talking. Chewing voraciously, the only response he gave me was a dark scowl. Tearing off pieces of roti, he dipped out large mouthfuls of bhaji, licking his fingers, obviously relishing every bit. I was sure I had brought too much, but he finished it all, wiping the dish clean. Taking a long drink, he leaned back in his chair, glared at me, and belched loudly. Wiping at his mouth with the front of his dhoti, he added fresh color to the older stains. "Latrine!" he growled suddenly, and his large eyes darted desperately around as though he had to find it quickly. I jumped up to help him, and he grabbed at my shoulder, pulling himself out of the chair. Leaning half on me and half on his heavy stick, he shuffled along as I led him to the outhouse we kept in the back as an extra. When he had gotten clumsily inside, he ordered me to wait. Presently, I heard him call out in the local Trinidadian Hindu dialect, "Awa, awa." He sounded desperate. "Yeah, what you want?" I answered uncertainly. "Come here." Hesitantly, I opened the door. He couldn't get off the seat. Those cold eyes seemed to mock me. Leaning over, trying not to breathe, I grabbed him under the armpits and pulled with all my might while he grunted loudly but helped little. Finally, he was on his feet again, swaying unsteadily, groping for his stick. He seemed unable to talk. Motioning and mumbling, he made me understand that he couldn't bend over far enough. Embarrassed, I reached down and pulled up his dhoti. Had long since passed my limit of breath-holding and was forced to take in deep gulps in spite of the horrible odor. He could not have had a bath in months. But he was a human being, and despite his cold stare and unfriendliness, I wanted to help him. It gave me a good feeling to be doing this, a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. I led him toward a faucet, thinking he would want a wash, but he had no interest in that. He grunted indignantly, and those cold eyes lit up with the hatred that I should have noticed had been smoldering just beneath the surface all the time. He gave me a shove and lurched toward the gate, leaning on his stick, limping and waddling like some injured animal. I reached the gate first and swung it open for him. He hobbled through, then turned and spat at my feet. Mute until now, suddenly he vomited out a torrent of the filthiest language imaginable in Hindi and English, expressing the hatred he felt that I possessed the things he had renounced. Did he really want what I had? Did he hate me because he thought I was rich and he was poor? I was confused, and stunned. Not even a thank you for what I'd done. Closing and locking the gate mechanically, hardly knowing what I was doing, I hurried to wash myself thoroughly, then climbed the steps onto the veranda in a daze. Numbed and shaken, I didn't return to the prayer room to meditate. Krishna's blissful smile was forgotten. In my room, I sank miserably down onto the edge of the bed with head bowed. The beggar was right. Poverty was more spiritual because riches are part of the illusion of ignorance. But why was Lakshmi the goddess of wealth and prosperity if possessions were evil or merely Maya? Why had she rewarded Nana with millions? And where was that gold now? Were the gods themselves, like all the temples erected in their honor, only part of a great illusion? I was still sitting on my bed, head in my hands, reliving this nightmare, unable to see Zero P with the devastating quest. Tie-ins it forced upon me. When the family returned, light-heartedly from their soul-cleansing excursion to the beach.